In the heart of bustling New York City, Dee Dee's Diner stood like a tiny island of familiarity amid the chaos. The air was thick with the scent of coffee, fried onions, and sizzling bacon. The faint hum of conversation mixed with the clinking of silverware and the occasional scrape of a chair against the worn-out linoleum floor. It was just another evening shift, just another day in the endless routine of Emily Harper. At 22 years old, Emily had once dreamed of finishing college, building a career, and making a better life for herself and her mother. But 2 years ago, when her mother Grace Harper was diagnosed with a chronic lung disease, those dreams had slipped through her fingers like grains of sand. Books and lectures were replaced with long hours at the diner, and ambition took a back seat to survival. Every dollar she earned went toward medical bills, every extra shift she picked up meant a little more security for her mother. Emily moved swiftly between tables, balancing plates and coffee mugs with practiced ease. Despite the exhaustion pressing against her bones, she forced a smile as she scribbled down orders, cracked light-hearted jokes with the regulars, and did her best to ignore the dull ache in her feet. This was her life now, predictable, exhausting, but stable. But as the bell above the diner's door jingled, signaling the entrance of a new customer, Emily barely spared a glance. She expected to see another familiar face, maybe a late-night worker or a couple of truckers stopping for a quick meal. Instead, when she finally looked up, her hands froze mid-wipe against her apron. A man had stepped in, a man who didn't belong here, Tall, sharply dressed in a charcoal gray suit, he carried himself with a quiet confidence that immediately set him apart. His silver-streaked dark hair was neatly combed, and his piercing blue eyes scanned the room with the precision of someone who was used to being in control. Billionaires didn't eat at places like Dee Dee's Diner. People like him belonged in high-end restaurants, not a grease-stained cafe at the edge of Queens. For a moment, Emily felt the curious gaze of the other diners as whispers rippled through the small space. Then, shaking off her unease, she grabbed a menu and walked toward the man. "Table for one?" she asked, her voice steady despite the sudden knot forming in her stomach. He nodded, his gaze settling on her with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably. "Yes, thank you." As Emily led him to a booth by the window, she couldn't shake the strange feeling creeping over her. Something about this man felt off, but she had no idea that this single encounter, this seemingly ordinary moment, was about to turn her world upside down. The low hum of the diner filled the air as Emily balanced a tray in one hand, effortlessly maneuvering between tables like she had done 1,000 times before. When she reached the booth by the window, she carefully placed the man's coffee and sandwich in front of him. "Here you go," she said with practiced ease, but her voice faltered when she noticed his expression. The man barely acknowledged her presence. His sharp blue eyes were locked onto something in his hands, a leather wallet, flipped open to a small, faded photograph, Emily wouldn't have looked if not for the way his entire demeanor had shifted. The confidence he carried when he walked in was gone. His posture was rigid, his fingers gripping the wallet a little too tightly. His face, previously unreadable, now carried something unfamiliar. Regret? Pain? Longing? Curiosity tugged at her, stronger than she expected. She stole a quick glance at the photo. And suddenly, the world stopped. Emily's breath hitched. The room around her, the clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversation, the distant sizzle from the kitchen, blurred into nothing. Because staring back at her from that old, weathered photograph was her mother. Not as she was now, frail and weary from years of illness. But young, vibrant, and full of life. Her auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders, her smile radiant, almost glowing. Emily had seen this version of her mother only in a handful of old pictures tucked away in a dusty shoebox under the bed. Why does he have this? Her grip tightened around the tray, her knuckles turning white. 100 thoughts raced through her mind, each one more absurd than the last. Was this man a long-lost friend? A forgotten relative? But no, her mother had never mentioned anyone like him. And Emily had no father. At least, not one she had ever known. A wave of unease crawled up her spine. She quickly set the tray down on the table, her hands trembling slightly. "Enjoy your meal," she mumbled, turning away before he could notice the way her fingers curled into fists at her sides. But as she walked back to the counter, she could feel his eyes on her. Watching. Measuring. The questions swirled relentlessly in her mind. Who is he? Why does he have my mother's picture? Why did he look at it like that? ***. She took a deep breath, willing herself to stay calm as she refilled a coffee pot. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it's nothing. ***. But deep down, she already knew. It wasn't nothing. Minutes passed, but she barely registered them. The diner carried on as usual, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her. She tried to shake it off, to focus on her work, but every time she glanced in his direction, she saw it, the way his fingers traced the edge of the photograph, the distant look in his eyes, as if he were staring at a ghost from his past. She couldn't take it anymore. When it was finally time to bring him the check, her heart pounded so hard she was sure he would hear it. She wiped her hands on her apron, steeled herself, and walked back to his table. Sliding the check across the table, she hesitated. Her throat felt dry, but she forced the words out before she could stop herself. "That picture in your wallet," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. She swallowed hard and met his gaze. "That's my mom. How do you have it?" For a split second, the world stilled. The man froze, his coffee mug hovering midair. A flicker of emotion flashed across his face, too quick for her to read. But then it settled into something else. Shock. Then guilt. Then, fear. His fingers clenched around the wallet before he carefully closed it, his sharp blue eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "What did you just say?" His voice was low, almost disbelieving. Emily took a shaky breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. "That woman in the photo," she said, more firmly this time. "She's my mom. Grace Harper. How do you know her?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Then, without answering, the man slowly reached into his wallet again, not for the photograph this time, but for something else. He pulled out a crisp $100 bill, far more than the meal cost, and set it on the table with deliberate precision. "Keep the change." And just like that, he stood. Emily's pulse spiked. She took a step forward, panic surging through her. Wait. But he was already gone. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped out into the cold night air. Emily stood there, stunned, the $100 bill crumpled in her trembling hands. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she tried to process what had just happened. She had come looking for an answer. Instead, she was left with 100 more questions. And a growing, undeniable feeling in her gut that her life would never be the same again. Emily felt as if the floor had been ripped out from under her. The tiny apartment, once familiar and safe, now felt like a suffocating box, pressing in around her. The man, Daniel Carver, stood in the doorway, his sharp blue eyes filled with something unreadable. His presence was overwhelming, too large, too imposing for their modest space. Behind her, the steady hiss of her mother's oxygen tank was the only sound breaking the silence. A reminder of reality. Of struggle. Of everything this man had never been a part of. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the edge of the door, her knuckles turning white. Every instinct screamed at her to shut it, to lock him out before he could unravel her world any further. But the desperation in his gaze held her frozen. "I need to see your mother," he had said. His voice, though calm, carried an urgency she couldn't ignore. Emily swallowed hard. She wanted to demand answers. Who was he to show up now? Why did he have her mother's picture in his wallet? Why did her mother whisper his name like he was a ghost risen from the past? But instead, she found herself stepping aside, her breath shaky as she gestured for him to enter. Daniel walked in, his presence swallowing the space whole. His sharp gaze flickered around the small living room, taking in the peeling wallpaper, the mismatched furniture, the pile of unpaid bills on the counter. His expression softened, barely, but enough for Emily to notice. Something twisted in her chest. Pity? No. He didn't get to feel sorry for them. Not after being absent their entire lives. Yet, as much as she wanted to shove him away, she was afraid of the truth that was unraveling before her. With a deep breath, she led him down the short hallway, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might give out. She should have prepared herself. Should have braced for whatever was about to happen. But she could never have prepared for this. The moment Grace saw him, her fragile hands trembled, the oxygen mask slipping from her grasp. Her breath caught, not from sickness, but from shock, Her mother's eyes, tired, worn, filled with years of silent suffering, widened with something Emily had never seen before, Daniel, Grace's voice was barely more than a breath. Daniel stilled, his hands curling into fists at his sides, his own breath hitching. His perfect composure, the confidence, the presence of a man who owned the world, fractured in an instant. Grace. His voice broke on her name. Emily felt her stomach twist into a painful knot. She turned to her mother, her mind screaming for some kind of explanation. "Mom," she whispered, barely recognizing her own voice. "You know him?" Grace's eyes flickered toward her daughter, as if suddenly remembering she was there. Her lips trembled, her gaze bouncing between them as if she was afraid to say the words. But then, she said them. "Emily, this is your father." Emily staggered back like she'd been punched. The words hit harder than anything she had ever experienced. No. No, that couldn't be true. She had no father. She had never had a father. Her breathing became uneven, the air suddenly too thick to inhale. She turned toward Daniel, her hands clenched into shaking fists. He was already looking at her, not with detachment, not with arrogance, but with something deeper. Something broken, Her stomach lurched. "You're lying," she hissed. But Grace shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "I never wanted to keep this from you." Her voice cracked. "When he left, I tried to tell him, but he was gone. He had disappeared. I had no way to reach him." Emily's pulse roared in her ears. Gone. He had been gone. And now, after 23 years, he had just decided to show up. Her chest burned with something hot, something ugly. Anger. Betrayal. Grief, Daniel slowly sank into a chair, his head dropping into his hands. "I didn't know," he whispered. "Grace, I swear, I didn't know." Emily could barely hear him over the pounding in her skull. Her father. This man, this billionaire, this stranger, was her father. Her breath shuddered as she glared at him, the rage building inside her like an uncontainable wildfire. "You left us," she said, her voice shaking, but filled with something sharp. "For what? For money?" Daniel lifted his head, his face pale, his eyes red-rimmed. "I was a fool." His voice was raw, unguarded, filled with regret. "I thought success was everything. I ran from responsibility, from love. And I have spent every single day regretting it." Emily scoffed, bitter laughter bubbling up despite the tears stinging her eyes. Regret? Now, She wanted to scream at him. To tell him that regret wasn't enough. That he had no right to stand here, in their home, acting as if he deserved a second chance. But then, she looked at her mother. Grace was watching Daniel with something Emily couldn't understand. It wasn't just sorrow. It wasn't just hurt. It was something far worse, acceptance. Like she had stopped hoping a long time ago. Emily's anger twisted inside her, mixing with something else, something that made her chest ache. Her mother had carried this secret for years. Had suffered alone, while Emily struggled to keep them afloat. And now, here was Daniel, too late, but here, Emily's fingers curled against her palm. Her whole world had just turned upside down, shattered beyond recognition. But now, standing in the middle of the wreckage, she had a choice. She could push him away. Or she could try to understand. Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. "How do you plan to fix this?" The room felt heavy, as if the very air had thickened with the weight of unspoken words. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears. Her hands were clenched at her sides, knuckles white as she stared at the man who had just shattered everything she thought she knew. Her father. The billionaire CEO, the stranger who had walked into her diner only hours ago, was her father. A sharp breath shuddered past her lips, her emotions a chaotic storm inside her. Anger, disbelief, hurt, they all collided at once, threatening to consume her. For years, she had accepted the absence of a father, convinced herself that whoever he was, he had never wanted her. That he had walked away and never looked back. But now, standing in front of her, his eyes red-rimmed and brimming with guilt, was a man who claimed he never even knew she existed. Her mother had always told her that some questions were better left unanswered. But now that the truth was out, what was she supposed to do with it? Daniel took a hesitant step forward, as if afraid she might bolt. His voice was quieter now, softer, almost fragile, I swear to you, Emily. I didn't know. If I had, his voice broke, and he exhaled, trying to regain control. I would have never left her. I would have never left you. Emily wanted to believe him. But belief was dangerous. Belief meant opening herself up to the possibility of being hurt again. She turned away, trying to steady herself, her breath shaky. She needed to get out of here, needed space to think, but before she could take a step, his next words stopped her in her tracks. Let me take care of you. Her head snapped up. What? Daniel's expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, something raw, desperate. Both of you, he continued. Grace, she deserves the best care. You deserve a chance to live without struggling every single day. You won't have to work yourself to exhaustion anymore. I have a home, upstate, far away from all this. Let me give you a better life. Emily stared at him, unable to speak. Could it really be that simple? Could she and her mother really just walk away from years of struggle, of late nights at the diner, of unpaid bills and endless exhaustion? She turned to her mother. Grace's tired eyes met hers, full of unspoken hope. A hope Emily hadn't seen in years. Emily swallowed hard, her throat tightening. Okay. The word left her lips before she could second-guess it. But this doesn't mean I forgive you. Not yet. Daniel nodded, a flicker of a smile breaking through his otherwise strained expression. That's fair, he said. I'll earn it. Days later. Emily still wasn't used to the quiet. For years, she had lived with the constant background noise of the city, sirens wailing, neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls, the relentless hum of life pressing in from all sides. But here, in Daniel's sprawling estate, everything was still. The air was crisp, the rooms warm, the silence unfamiliar. And for the first time in a long time, her mother looked at peace. True to his word, Daniel had brought in the best doctors. Within a week, Grace's condition had already started improving. She had more energy now, her laughter coming easier. Emily hadn't realized just how long it had been since she had seen her mother truly happy. And Daniel? He had been careful. He never pushed, never forced his way into her space. He gave her time, let her process things at her own pace. And yet, he was always there, in the small moments, making sure her mother had everything she needed. Asking about her day. Leaving books in the library he thought she might like. She hated to admit it, but he was trying. And she didn't know what to do with that. One evening, as snow dusted the estate's windows, Emily found herself wandering into the grand library. She ran her fingers over the spines of old books, aimlessly pulling one from the shelf, until something unexpected caught her eye. An old leather-bound photo album. She hesitated. Then, slowly, she flipped it open. Inside were pictures of her mother. Not as she was now, frail and tired, but young. Vibrant. Laughing. And beside her, Daniel. Emily's breath caught in her throat. He looked different in these photos, carefree, in love. His arm was always around her mother, his face always turned toward her, as if she were the most important thing in the world. Her fingers traced over the images, her chest tightening. He had loved her. She wasn't expecting the voice behind her. I never stopped loving her. Emily turned sharply, finding Daniel standing in the doorway. His expression was solemn, his hands tucked into his pockets as if bracing himself. She swallowed. Then why did you leave? His exhale was slow, heavy. Because I was young. Because I was stupid. Because I thought ambition was the only thing that mattered. And by the time I realized what I had lost, it was too late. Silence stretched between them. Emily looked down at the photos again, her fingers brushing over an image of her mother beaming at the camera. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, but steady. I think I'm starting to believe you. Daniel's face softened, something shifting in his gaze. He took a step closer, hesitant, as if afraid of scaring her off. I'm not going anywhere this time, he promised. And this time, Emily let herself believe it.